Hey guys, this is right after last video. Last video was a recap video of what happened in Little Nightmares. If you just really don't want to just watch the whole game, that was basically a step-by-step. I did leave a lot of things out. I just kind of gave you a simplified version because you should definitely play it, or at least watch it. Like I said last video, if you don't have the money to play it, watch Super Horror Bro because he is already almost done, and the US release hasn't even happened yet. So, yeah, so last video was a recap, and you really have to watch that because some of the stuff I'm going to talk about this video, the actual theory and explanation of what happened last video, or of what happened in the game and what my take is on it, you're going to have to know what happened. So here we go. Now, I'm going to say this. See, Bandai Namco did confirm themselves that this is a sequel. Um, and it is. But it's also a prequel. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me explain. See, this game is a prequel to Little Nightmares. Okay, I'm going to say that now. All of you shouting in the comments, but it's a sequel. They even said it's a sequel. Now, it is a sequel. A sequel to Very Little Nightmares. See, they weren't specific, but it's evident that the events of this game take place after the events of Very Little Nightmares. And a lot of this stuff, and kind of basically after the comics, if you didn't know, there are digital comics of like explaining some stuff, just some kind of fillers. But this is before, and I'm going to tell you why. So, obviously, there's a few things to take in consideration. One, of course, she doesn't have a raincoat. Yes, it could have been taken off her, but later on you find her raincoat in, like, way opposite place that the hunter wouldn't have gone. And also, I'm pretty sure we explored almost the entirety of the hunter's house. We would have seen that raincoat somewhere. So she doesn't have her raincoat. Another thing, like I said last time, she, no matter what you say, even if she's trying to hide it, she does not have her powers. Constantly throughout the Little Nightmares 2, I am struggling for words. She's captured, taken, and beat up and crud. She does not have her powers. Otherwise she wouldn't have been in those situations. Thin Man wouldn't have taken her. The bullies wouldn't have captured her. She wouldn't have bashed one of the bullies in with her bare hands. Thing that happens in the game that I'm also going to talk about. But yeah, she does not have her powers. No raincoat, no powers. Also, I might add, she has no stomach issues. She's not hungry all the time. A very, very important aspect of Little Nightmares is her hunger. Constantly hungry. She never gets satisfied from it until she eventually basically just eats the lady and kind of, sucks out her powers and starts sucking out souls. But yeah, so this is a prequel to the Little Nightmares, because that's obvious. But a sequel to Very Little Nightmares. We know that because after Very Little Nightmares, some of the first comic, the first little comic that you can get in the App Store, actually, it's free. Nice little comics, you can get. I personally haven't read them, but I've seen them through videos that Super Horror Bro has done. Super Horror Bro is like really big aspect of this. He's what I watch because I don't have money. That can change if you subscribe and like. Shameless plug. Yeah, so sequel, prequel, and all that. Another thing that I would like to point out is Mono is obviously the Thin Man. Now, I know what you might be saying is that how can that be? Because Mono defeats the Thin Man. And yes, he does become another Thin Man, but it doesn't mean it's the same one, does it? That's where I start saying I think it is, because at the end of the game, you get an achievement, and it's like signal disrupted or whatever. You literally like destroy the, you hurt the signal tower anyway. You fatally wound it. And Six betrays you. You drop into the signal tower to the depths of it, and you become the Thin Man. And hold up, I can't focus with this goddamn music. I know it's good music, but Jesus Christ. Okay, now we're back. This might be a little more boring, but I think you should probably hear what I have to say first. Also, there's no script, so if I go on tangents, yeah, whatever. It's not scripted, this talk. But anyway, I would like to say, starting off, that Thin Man and Mono are the same thing. Now, I think a big aspect of this, and this is kind of far-fetched, but it makes sense, and I'll be explaining throughout this video why. Mono is a Thin Man, and this is a time loop. See, when the signal tower is getting, demolished, Six is separated from herself. There's a Shadow Six, and which is probably why Six betrays Mono like that. She drops him in, and he becomes the Thin Man, which evidently also seems to save the signal tower from destruction. See, what I think happens is it's a time loop. The signal tower constantly getting destroyed, constantly getting into Six's head, constantly making her betray Mono before she leaves, and Mono winding up becoming the Thin Man again, and warping them backwards in time so the tower saves itself, because the tower is sentient, because I mean it even has eyes and all that. But yeah, so and Mono's immune because he is tied to the signal tower. So is the Thin Man. There's some, I don't know what it is. Might even find out in the Gnomes Attic DLC that is part of the game. It is literally in the deluxe edition. You can see you get a DLC out of it. So it might be explained there. It might not. We'll see. But yeah. So they're connected somehow, some way. I don't know, but they are. I mean, even Mono has Thin Man's powers, which is another thing. So Mono is Thin Man. This game is a sequel to Very Little Nightmares and a prequel to Little Nightmares. Okay, those are my main points. Now, 6. Um, 6 needs to be talked about. So you start out with the first 3 chapters of the game is really building up, is like, it's not even that much of a story aspect. It's more the game building up the friendship and the bond between Six and Mono, which I think is really important, because if they're good friends, at the end of it, they're good friends, but Six betrays Mono, which is why I want to talk about this, because throughout the game, she's been seen to get violent and a little traumatized, PTSD acting, and she goes through the game, or the entire game. She gets caught by the Thin Man. When she does, part of herself becomes Shadow Six, a little bit of like a glitchy remain, like all of the other glitchy remains that you collect throughout the game to get a secret end, or well, secret cutscene anyway at the end of the game. So she split from herself, basically. And it's weird. It's just very weird aspect to add in. But then you also find out that when, in the 5th chapter, the boss is Six, a monstrous Six, that you defeat, and she gets returned to normal. But you never see her shadow self reform with her spirit reform with her. Which is why I think the signal tower is still controlling Six at that point. which is why Six betrays Mono. Six betrays Mono because the signal tower is still controlling her. She escapes, Shadow Six appears, kind of looks at the mob poster that kind of gives you hints, and Six starts getting hunger issues. Now, what I'm thinking this is the kids are being grabbed and turned into monsters, and those spirits are like their good self. They're like conscious, their consciousness, their good selves. They're like what they were, past remnants of what they were, who they were. And Six, just like, because she's not warped into a monster, she doesn't look like a monster anymore because the signal tower doesn't have a physical effect to her, but it has a mental effect. She may not be a monster on the outside, just like the lady. She doesn't look like a monster, but deep down inside she is a monster, like the mirrors. They're showing their inner selves. That's why the lady is actually a monster. Six is still a monster. She's separated from herself. Eventually, I do think Six will re-become what she was in the signal tower. Now, this also may answer some questions about the citizens. See, something constant through this is that, like, the lady, and the janitor, and the cooks, and the teacher, and the doctor, they're all monsters. They're all monstrosities, but there are people that are distorted, and, you know, others that are gluttoned up and become weird monster things. Now, this is interesting because why aren't they monsters like them? They're more monsters. Now this is, I think, where it comes in. See, the monsters that you see in the first game, well, the guests, I think they're properly called in the first game, aren't distorted by the signal tower because they aren't in the city. They aren't near TVs. And the viewers, I think they're called, are distorted and rotted because they're in front of the TV so much and really close to the signal tower. So they're distorted and warped. Their souls are basically gone. They're mindless freaks, basically. But the teacher and the monsters, they're all weird. Also, I like to say that they eat anything that basically isn't affected by the signal tower. And you say this because the viewers and the guests are human, but they're distorted and warped, or, well, the viewers are warped and the guests are mindless, hungry things. They're affected by the signal tower, but there's constant minions throughout that aren't human. There are no properly human things in the game besides the children and the weird monster-like people. Now, I think this is getting at is that, or, well, what I'm trying to get at is that the monster people are actually children. They're like 6. They were warped, their souls were taken by the Thin Man, and their empty shells were warped and disfigured into monsters. Don't believe me? Well, here's at least one major thing that got me thinking. In the school, there's a ghost remnant, a shadow remnant, if you will. And it's by a noose. Very grotesque, but it's by a noose. And what I'm thinking is that child used to be, or, well, ended up being the teacher. The Thin Man got to it. And, you know, the kid separated, or the spirit separated from the kid. The kid hung herself, but didn't die, because there wasn't a spirit to die in there. It just was a hollow shell. Which would explain the teacher's neck. She hung herself, and because of that, her neck can go all twisted and weird. Now, there is Also, a few other things, like a ghost in the outhouse, which you can actually get in, which would also kind of explain um the hunter. That could have been the hunter. Something happened to him. Don't know what, but something definitely happened to him. And he became the goat. Well, I mean, besides, the thin man got to him, and then he just became the hunter because he was in the woods, just became the hunter. Um, Another one is in the hospital. You also find a few things, few people. One is a child next to a bathtub with a guy in it that's really weird yellow tubes that look like intestines. Dead man got to that one. He was trapped in the room because he started growing, became a monster, died in the tub. There's also a little ghost at the shelf trying to reach the duck on the shelf in another part. Dead man got to him. He died. He became Doctor. Okay, that's what I think. Maybe there's another ghost child that I don't know of, but that's what I think. Which would also, because there are no monsters in the fourth and the fifth besides 6 as a monster. But also, there doesn't seem to be any shadow children there either, which also kind of backs it up a bit. And that's basically all. I mean, it explains the monsters. The game explains the monsters a bit. The game is a sequel to Very Little Nightmares, a prequel to Little Nightmares. Mono's the Thin Man. It's all like one giant time loop, which the only way that Mono would be able to break it is if 6 didn't betray him. If she fought off the signal tower, and she didn't betray him. Which is why I think there may be a third game. Either to have a game that makes it so Mono escapes that time loop, or a third game as like basically a recreation of the first game, but what would have happened if Mono was there? Or like maybe not even in the maw, maybe they didn't even go into the maw. Maybe Shadow 6 never separated from herself, and they went on another different wild adventure that Mono and 6 had to go through that explained things just a little more. But yeah, so that's like my main theory. There are probably a lot of things that I forgot to mention in this, because I don't have them all goddamn written down. But this is like the basic theory. It's a prequel to Little Nightmares, sequel to Very Little Nightmares and the comics. It's a giant time loop that Mono is constantly going through. Mono killing himself, basically warping himself out of existence, hurting the signal tower to the point where it could die, and then the influence of the signal tower makes 6 betray Mono, getting Mono to wind up back as the Thin Man and saving the tower from dying, warping itself back in time. Maybe that doesn't even happen. Maybe it just happens by itself. But warping, somehow ending up back in time to continue the loop until something changes. And that's about it. Thank you guys for listening to this theory. It's a far-fetched one, I know that, but it's a little weird how much it works, how much it's explained, and 6, and in the end 6 is either on the maw or is about to head to the maw. Also, another thing, that I think it's a prequel to Little Nightmares, is the fact that at the end of Little Nightmares, it's seen as 6 on the maw, no way out. And you know that the maw is a submarine, basically. And the only way out would be to swim, but 6 definitely would not survive that swim. So we can fairly assume that 6 would still be on the maw, stuck. Just there. not able to go anywhere because there has to be some form of communication between the lady and whoever brought the boat. Which, you know, makes sense. If the lady didn't respond, they wouldn't bring in a new boat. So 6 is trapped there. So basically, 6 betrays Mono, kind of dooms the world again, or well, just doesn't save the world, goes off, ends up in purgatory. Mono ends up stuck in a room until the time he's stuck in a nightmarish goddamn hell of a time loop, and 6 is in goddamn purgatory, which there would also probably be her dying alone by herself, no more souls to eat, no more souls to consume, so nothing to eat, locked on the maw in the middle of the ocean, die. The loop happens. We should also explain why Mono has the time to grow up into the Thin Man, because you see Mono grows up into him. So, you know, he grows up into the Thin Man, 6 dies, time loop happens, everything restarts, and it'll all continue and continue until 6 and the influence of the signal tower on her is changed somehow, some way. Don't know, but as long as it's changed, then third game. All I'm saying is third game there has to be some third game. Not everything is explained. Yeah. So, hope you guys enjoyed this theory. Argue and trash it as much as you want in the comics or comments. I don't give a shit. Help the theory a bit more. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.